What happens when the truth finally comes to your front door, not with shouting or violence, but in a crisp white envelope? Can a woman who always believed she could control the story survive when her husband decides to fight back with silence, evidence, and the law? When the world is watching, will honesty set her free, or will it be the weapon that destroys her? I hadn't expected Ethan home until morning. The engineering conference was supposed to run late, and Julian had been so attentive all evening, refilling my wine, touching my shoulder, offering to help clean up after our dinner party. When headlights swept across the living room window at 2 a.m., I was on the couch with Julian's arm around me, our faces too close for any innocent explanation. The front door opened. My husband stood silhouetted in the frame. Nobody moved. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Julian's hand was still on my thigh, my lipstick smudged, wine glasses abandoned on the coffee table. Ethan's keys jangled once in his hand, then stopped. His eyes moved from Julian to me, taking in the scene with the methodical precision he brought to everything else in his life. "Conference ended early," Ethan said finally, his voice flat as concrete. He stepped inside, closing the door with deliberate care. "I see you two found ways to entertain yourselves." Julian scrambled to his feet, nearly knocking over his wine glass. "Ethan, hey man, we were just..." "Just what?" Ethan's tone could have frozen water. He set his briefcase down with mechanical precision, never taking his eyes off us. "Just helping my wife with the dishes. Just discussing the weather." I found my voice, though it came out smaller than I intended. "Ethan, you're misunderstanding what you're seeing here." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Am I? Because what I'm seeing is my wife of 8 years on our couch with my best friend since college, looking guilty as hell at 2 a.m. Julian ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit I'd grown fond of over the past few months. "Look, nothing happened, okay? We were just talking, having a few drinks after everyone left." "Talking?" Ethan repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "Is that what we're calling it?" My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't how I'd imagined this moment, if I'd ever really let myself imagine it at all. In my mind, if Ethan ever found out about Julian's attention, about the way we'd been dancing around each other for months, I'd have time to explain. Time to make him understand that this was about him, about how distant he'd become, how he buried himself in work and left me feeling invisible. "Ethan, please, let's talk about this rationally," I said, standing up and smoothing my dress. "You're tired from traveling. You're not thinking clearly." His eyes narrowed. "I'm thinking perfectly clearly, Lysandra. Clearer than I have in months, actually." The way he said my full name sent a chill down my spine. He only used it when he was truly angry, which wasn't often. Ethan was controlled, measured, the kind of man who solved problems with spreadsheets and 5-year plans. But standing there in our living room, with Julian shifting nervously beside me and the evidence of our evening scattered around us, he looked like a stranger. "I should go," Julian said, grabbing his jacket from the chair. "This is between you two." "Yes, you should," Ethan agreed, stepping aside to clear the path to the door. "But Julian, don't come back, ever." Julian paused, looking back at me with something that might have been regret or relief. I couldn't tell which, and that uncertainty hit me harder than I expected. He'd spent the last 3 months making me feel special, wanted, alive, in ways I'd forgotten were possible. And now he was walking away without a fight. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded final. Ethan and I stood facing each other across the living room that suddenly felt enormous. The party decorations from earlier, balloons, streamers, the birthday banner for his 36th, seemed absurd now, like props from someone else's life. "How long?" he asked. "Nothing happened," I repeated, but the words felt hollow even to me. "How long, Lysandra?" I sank back onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. "It's not what you think. Julian and I, we're just friends. He's been supportive, when you've been so wrapped up in work, so distant. I've been lonely, Ethan. When's the last time you really looked at me? Really talked to me about something other than Theo's school schedule or the mortgage payment? Ethan stared at me for a long moment. So this is my fault. That's not what I'm saying. It sounds exactly like what you're saying. He picked up his briefcase again. I work 60 hours a week to provide for this family. I come home every night. I've never so much as looked at another woman. But because I'm not sufficiently attentive, you decide to cozy up with my best friend. Julian understands me, I said, and immediately regretted it. Understands you? Ethan nodded slowly. Right. Well, I'm going to bed. We'll talk about this tomorrow when we've both had time to think. He headed toward the stairs, then paused. Oh, and Lysandra, next time you want to have your understanding sessions with Julian, maybe don't do it in our house. Our 6-year-old son sleeps upstairs. The mention of Theo hit like a physical blow. In all my justifications, all my rationalization about loneliness and neglect, I'd somehow managed not to think about our son sleeping peacefully above us while I let another man put his hands on me. Ethan disappeared upstairs, leaving me alone with the wreckage of the evening. I gathered the wine glasses with shaking hands, trying to impose order on the chaos, but the lipstick stain on Julian's glass seemed to mock my efforts. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. I was the victim here, wasn't I? The neglected wife, starved for attention and affection. Julian had made me feel beautiful again, desired, like I was more than just a mother and a house manager. Surely Ethan would understand that once he calmed down. But as I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I found the door locked. Ethan had never locked me out before. Never. I stood in the hallway, my hand on the cold doorknob, and for the first time wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Chapter 2. A calculated confession. 3 days passed in Arctic silence. Ethan left for work before I woke up, and came home after Theo was in bed. When we did cross paths, he was polite, distant, treating me like a house guest he barely tolerated. No yelling, no demands for explanations, no dramatic confrontations. Just cold, methodical indifference that somehow felt worse than anger. By Friday, I was desperate. His birthday dinner was planned for Saturday night. Reservations at Marcello's, the Italian place where we'd had our first anniversary. Julian and Leah would be there, along with Ethan's mother Ruth and my co-worker Faye. I'd been planning it for weeks, back when I thought I could manage both my marriage and my growing feelings for Julian without consequences. Now, facing the prospect of sitting through dinner pretending everything was normal, I realized I had to take control of the narrative. If the truth was going to come out, and Ethan's behavior suggested it might, I needed to be the one telling it. Saturday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth for October. I chose my outfit carefully. The blue dress Ethan had complimented last year, subtle makeup, my wedding ring prominently displayed. I looked like a devoted wife, which was exactly the image I needed to project. The restaurant buzzed with weekend energy. Marcello's was the kind of place that made every dinner feel special, with dim lighting and checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic bread that could make anyone feel optimistic about life. Our party was seated at a round table in the back corner, away from the main dining room traffic. Ethan arrived exactly on time, as always. He kissed my cheek for the benefit of our guests, but his lips barely grazed my skin. To anyone watching, we looked like a normal couple celebrating another year of life together. "Happy birthday, darling," I said, loud enough for the table to hear. 36 looks good on you." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you, Lysandra. This is lovely." Julian and Leah arrived 10 minutes later, Julian looking uncomfortable in his good suit, Leah radiant in a way that made me feel dowdy by comparison. She worked at our consulting firm too, in the accounting department, and had always been friendly in that professional, surface-level way. Tonight, she seemed genuinely happy to be here. "Ethan!" Julian clapped him on the shoulder, and I watched my husband's face carefully, for any sign of the anger I knew was simmering beneath the surface. But Ethan just smiled and shook Julian's hand, like nothing had changed. Ruth arrived last, as was her habit. Ethan's mother was a handsome woman in her 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of presence that made waiters stand straighter. She'd never quite warmed to me, though she was always polite. Tonight, she kissed Ethan's cheek and squeezed his hand with obvious affection. "My brilliant son," she said, settling into her chair. "Another year older and wiser." "Hopefully wiser," Ethan replied, and I caught something in his tone that made my stomach tighten. The conversation flowed easily at first. Faye told funny stories about our office manager's latest attempts at modernizing the filing system. Ruth updated us on her book club's dramatic reading of Gone Girl. Leah talked about the vacation she and Julian were planning for Christmas. I watched Julian throughout dinner, looking for signs of the man who'd held me on the couch 3 nights ago, who'd whispered that he'd never met anyone like me. But he seemed perfectly normal, laughing at Ethan's jokes, asking about his engineering projects, playing the role of loyal friend without missing a beat. Maybe that's what bothered me most, how easy it was for him to pretend nothing had changed. By the time the waiter brought Ethan's birthday cake, chocolate, his favorite, I'd made my decision. The table was relaxed, everyone slightly wine-buzzed and content. It was the perfect moment to control the story. "Before we sing," I said, raising my glass, "I want to say something." Ethan looked at me sharply, but I was already committed. "I want to apologize to everyone here, especially to Leah." I took a breath, making sure my voice carried the right note of brave honesty. The other night, after our dinner party, Julian stayed late to help clean up, and I'm afraid he made some inappropriate advances. The table went dead silent. Leah's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Ruth's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. Faye looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. "I wanted everyone to hear this from me," I continued, "because I believe in honesty, and because Julian crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. I told him no, of course, but I feel terrible that it happened at all." Julian's face had gone pale. "Lysandra, I'm not finished." My voice was steady, reasonable. "I love my husband, I love my family, and I won't let anyone jeopardize that, no matter how persistent they might be." I sat down, my heart racing, but my expression calm. I'd done it. I'd controlled the narrative, painted myself as the loyal wife who'd been pursued by an unscrupulous friend. Julian looked guilty as hell, which only supported my story. Leah looked devastated, which was unfortunate but necessary. Ethan set down his water glass with deliberate care. "That's quite a story, Lysandra." "It's not a story, it's the truth." "Your version of it, anyway." He looked around the table, his gaze settling on each face in turn. "Julian, would you like to respond to these accusations?" Julian shifted in his seat, sweat beading on his forehead. Look, maybe I misread some signals. Maybe I had too much to drink, but I never meant to make anyone uncomfortable." "Signals," Ethan repeated. "What kind of signals?" The trap was closing around Julian, and I felt a surge of satisfaction. This was working exactly as I'd planned. "I don't know, man. She seemed receptive. We'd been talking a lot at work, texting sometimes. I thought maybe—" Julian trailed off, realizing how he sounded. "You thought maybe what?" Leah's voice was ice cold. "That my husband was justified in making a pass at a married woman because she was friendly to him." "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant." Ethan's voice cut through Julian's protests. "You thought my wife was available because she smiled at you, because she answered your texts, because she made you feel special." The accuracy of his words made me flinch. How much did Ethan know? How much had he figured out? "Ethan, please," I said. "I've already handled this. Julian knows he was out of line. There's no need to make this more dramatic than it needs to be." My husband looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Dramatic, right." He pulled out his wallet and placed 3 20s on the table. I think we're done here. But we haven't sung happy birthday, Faye said weakly. I'm not much in the mood for celebrating. Ethan stood up, his movements controlled and precise. Thank you all for coming. Lysandra, I'll meet you at home. He walked out without looking back, leaving me to face the wreckage of his birthday dinner. Ruth gathered her purse with obvious disapproval. Leah stared at Julian, like she was seeing him for the first time. Faye mumbled something about an early morning and practically fled. Well, Ruth said, her voice crisp with judgment, that was certainly illuminating. Lysandra, dear, I hope you're proud of yourself. She left without saying goodbye. Julian and Leah followed soon after, Leah walking 3 steps ahead of her husband and refusing to look at me. The ride home would be interesting for them. Faye lingered just long enough to squeeze my shoulder. Are you okay? That was really brave, what you did. I'm fine, I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. I just believe in honesty. But as I sat alone at the table, surrounded by the debris of Ethan's ruined birthday, I wondered if honesty was really what I'd just delivered, or if I'd simply found a more sophisticated way to lie. Chapter 3. The silence grows. Ethan didn't come home that night, or the next morning. When Theo asked where Daddy was, I told him Daddy had to work on a special project and would be back soon. The lie came easily, but Theo's confused expression lingered in my mind long after he'd gone back to his cartoons. Sunday afternoon, I tried calling Ethan's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I tried his office line, knowing he sometimes went in on weekends. No answer. I even called his mother, swallowing my pride and hoping Ruth might tell me where he was. He's fine, Ruth said, her voice clipped. He needs some time to think. Ruth, I know you don't approve of how I handled things at dinner, but... How you handled things? Ruth's laugh was sharp. Lysandra, dear, you humiliated my son in front of his friends and family. You aired your dirty laundry in public and somehow managed to make yourself the victim in the process. I'm honestly impressed by the audacity. I was trying to be honest. You were trying to control the story. There's a difference. Ruth's tone softened slightly. Ethan will come home when he's ready, but if I were you, I'd spend some time thinking about what you really want from this marriage. Because from where I'm sitting, it doesn't look like it's my son. She hung up before I could respond. Monday morning brought a return to routine that felt anything but normal. Ethan came home just long enough to shower and change clothes, barely acknowledging my presence. He kissed Theo goodbye, grabbed his coffee, and left for work without a word to me. At the office, the atmosphere was strained. Word of Saturday night's dinner had somehow reached our colleagues, probably through Faye, who, despite her good intentions, had never been able to keep a secret. Julian avoided me completely, taking his lunch breaks at different times and finding reasons to work late when I was around. Leah was worse. She looked through me like I was invisible, responding to my professional communications with icy efficiency, but nothing more. When I tried to approach her in the break room Tuesday morning, she simply walked away. Leah, wait, I called after her. Can we talk about this? She turned back, her expression colder than I'd ever seen it. What exactly would you like to discuss, Lysandra? How my husband has been texting you for months. How you led him on and then threw him under the bus when you got caught. Or maybe you want to explain how this is all somehow my fault. It's not your fault. Julian made his choices, and you made yours. Leah stepped closer, lowering her voice. You know what the worst part is? I actually felt sorry for you. I thought you and Ethan were going through a rough patch, and I was worried about you. I even suggested Julian check in on you when Ethan was traveling. I basically gave my husband permission to have an emotional affair with you. The word affair hit like a slap. It wasn't an affair. Nothing physical happened. Right, just months of secret conversations, late-night texts, and intimate moments on your couch. But since you didn't technically sleep together, it doesn't count. Leah's smile was bitter. You're a piece of work, Lysandra. I hope whatever you got out of this was worth destroying 2 marriages. She walked away, leaving me standing in the break room with my face burning and my hands shaking. That evening, I tried to talk to Ethan again. He was in his study, paperwork spread across his desk in neat piles. The room smelled like his cologne and the leather of his chair, familiar scents that usually comforted me. Tonight, they felt like barriers. "Ethan, we need to talk about what happened." He didn't look up from his papers. "Do we?" "Yes, this silent treatment isn't solving anything. We're married. We have a son. We need to work through this." "Work through what, exactly?" He set down his pen and finally looked at me. "Your emotional affair with my best friend, your public humiliation of our family, or maybe you want to work through your complete inability to take responsibility for your actions." "I did take responsibility. I told everyone what Julian did." "You told everyone your version of what Julian did. You painted yourself as the innocent victim and him as the predator. Very convenient." I sat down in the chair across from his desk, trying to project calm reasonableness. "What do you want me to say, Ethan? That I encouraged him? That I enjoyed the attention? Fine. Maybe I did, but only because you've been so distant, so wrapped up in work, that I felt invisible in my own marriage. So it is my fault. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying there were problems in our marriage that made me vulnerable to someone else's attention." Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying me with an expression I couldn't read. "Vulnerable? That's an interesting word choice. What would you call it?" "Selfish, entitled, manipulative." His voice was calm, matter of fact. "You wanted attention, so you took it from my best friend. When you got caught, you threw him under the bus to save yourself, and now you're trying to make me complicit in your choices by blaming our marriage. That's not fair, isn't it?" Ethan opened his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. "Would you like to know what I've been doing for the past few days, Lysandra? Besides thinking about our marriage and whether it's worth saving." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" "I've been gathering information, phone records, text messages, credit card statements." He opened the folder, revealing printed pages covered with highlighted text. "Did you know that you and Julian exchanged over 300 texts in the past 2 months? Interesting reading, by the way." My heart started racing. "You went through my phone?" "I went through our phone records, perfectly legal for the account holder." Ethan pulled out a sheet of paper. "Here's a particularly illuminating exchange from 2 weeks ago. Julian, can't stop thinking about you." Your response: "Ethan is working late again. House feels empty without the right person in it." Ethan, I can explain. Here's another one. Julian, wish I could hold you right now. Your response: "Soon. Just need to figure out the right time and place." Ethan looked up at me. "Still want to maintain that he was the aggressor and you were the innocent victim." The evidence was damning, but I couldn't let him control the narrative. Those texts were taken out of context. We were going through a difficult time, and Julian was being supportive. Supportive. Ethan closed the folder. "Right. Well, I've been supportive too. I've been documenting everything very carefully. Dates, times, communications, just in case I need it later." "Need it for what?" "For whatever comes next." Ethan stood up, gathering his papers. "I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight, and for the foreseeable future. I suggest you use this time to think about what you really want, because I'm done pretending this marriage is working." He walked past me toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Lysandra, next time you want to play the victim, make sure you destroy the evidence first. Amateur mistake." I sat alone in his study, surrounded by the tools of his methodical, organized life, and realized that my husband wasn't just angry. He was planning something, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I was genuinely afraid. Chapter 4. Reputation in ruins. The next few weeks passed in a blur of social isolation and professional embarrassment. Word of the dinner incident had spread through our social circle like wildfire, and the reactions were overwhelmingly negative. People I'd considered friends suddenly had scheduling conflicts when I suggested lunch. Invitations to parties and gatherings mysteriously stopped arriving. At work, the situation was even worse. Julian had requested a transfer to a different department, claiming he needed a fresh start. Our manager, Helen, called me into her office on a Thursday morning that felt like a march to the gallows. "Lysandra, we need to discuss the situation with Julian," Helen said, her expression carefully neutral. She was a small woman in her 50s who ran the consulting firm with quiet efficiency and zero tolerance for drama. "What situation?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "The situation that has half my staff gossiping in the break room and the other half walking on eggshells around you and Julian." Helen folded her hands on her desk. "I don't care what happens in people's personal lives, but when it starts affecting the workplace, it becomes my problem. Helen, I want you to know that I never encouraged Julian's behavior. He made me uncomfortable, and I handled it as professionally as possible. By announcing it at a dinner party," Helen's eyebrows rose. "Lysandra, I've heard multiple versions of what happened that night, and none of them reflect well on your judgment." My face burned. I was trying to be honest about an uncomfortable situation. "You were trying to manage your reputation at the expense of a colleague's. That's not honesty, it's politics." Helen leaned forward. "I'm not going to fire you, but I am going to strongly suggest that you keep your personal drama out of this office. We have clients to serve and a business to run. Can you do that?" "Of course." "Good, because if this situation escalates any further, I'll have to consider whether you're still a good fit for this company." I left Helen's office feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. The threat was clear: keep quiet and keep my head down, or find a new job. In a town this size, with my reputation already damaged, finding equivalent work would be nearly impossible. That afternoon, I tried to reach out to Faye, hoping to salvage at least one friendship from the wreckage. I found her in the parking lot after work, loading files into her car. "Faye, wait up," I called, jogging to catch up with her. She turned, and I was surprised by the coolness in her expression. Faye had always been warm, supportive, the kind of friend who brought soup when you were sick and remembered your birthday without Facebook reminders. "Hi, Lysandra." "I was hoping we could grab coffee sometime. I feel like we haven't talked since Ethan's birthday dinner." Faye closed her car door and faced me fully. "I've been thinking about that night a lot, actually, about what you said and how you said it. I know it was awkward, but I felt like I had to be honest." "Honest?" Faye's voice sharpened. "Lysandra, I've worked with you for 3 years. I've seen how you interact with Julian, how you light up when he comes around, how you always find excuses to work late when he's here. You think I'm blind?" "Faye, that's not—" "Let me finish." Faye held up a hand. "I watched you flirt with your husband's best friend for months. I watched you complain about Ethan being distant while you were texting Julian during lunch breaks. And then, when you got caught, you threw Julian under the bus to save yourself. Julian made his own choices, and so did you, but only one of you is taking responsibility for them." Faye shook her head. "You know what bothers me most? I defended you. When people started talking after the dinner, I told them you were going through a rough patch and deserved some understanding. But now I realize you don't want understanding. You want everyone to feel sorry for you." She got in her car and drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. That weekend was Theo's school fall festival, an annual event that usually brought our whole community together. In better times, Ethan and I would have worked the ring toss booth together, laughing at the kids' determined attempts to win stuffed animals. This year, we arrived separately and maintained careful distance from each other. I watched Ethan from across the playground, noting how easily he chatted with other parents, how normal he seemed. Several people approached him with warm smiles and friendly conversation. When they saw me, the smiles became polite nods before they found reasons to move along. Leah was there with Julian, and they seemed to be putting on a united front. But I noticed the tension in their body language, the way Leah's smiles didn't reach her eyes, how Julian kept checking his phone like he was looking for an escape route. "Mommy, why isn't Daddy standing with us?" Theo asked, tugging on my jacket. "Daddy's busy talking to Mr. Henderson about work stuff," I said, pointing to where Ethan was indeed chatting with another engineer. "But he always stands with us at school things. Sometimes grown-ups need space to talk to other grown-ups." Theo considered this with the serious expression he got when trying to understand adult behavior. "Are you and Daddy fighting?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What makes you ask that? You don't eat dinner together anymore, and Daddy sleeps in the guest room now. Tommy's parents did that before his dad moved out." I knelt down to Theo's eye level, my heart breaking at the matter-of-fact way he'd delivered this observation. "Daddy and I are working through some things, but we both love you very much. That's never going to change. But will Daddy move out like Tommy's dad?" I didn't know how to answer that question. The truth was, I didn't know what Ethan was planning. Our conversations had dwindled to logistics about Theo's schedule and household maintenance. He was polite, distant, and completely impenetrable. "I hope not, sweetheart. I really hope not." That night, after Theo was in bed, I found Ethan in his study again. The folder from weeks earlier had grown thicker, and I could see legal documents mixed in with the phone records and printed emails. "Ethan, we need to talk about Theo." He looked up from his paperwork. "What about him?" "He's asking questions about why you're sleeping in the guest room, about whether you're going to move out. He's scared." He should be scared. His mother destroyed his family for the sake of an ego boost. The accusation stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. "This doesn't have to destroy our family. We can work through this, go to counseling, figure out how to rebuild trust." "Trust." Ethan set down his pen. "Lysandra, you had an emotional affair with my best friend for months. When you got caught, you lied about it in front of our friends and family. You've shown no genuine remorse, no real accountability. What exactly am I supposed to trust? I made mistakes. You made choices, calculated, deliberate choices." Ethan opened the folder and pulled out a document I didn't recognize. "Do you know what this is?" I shook my head. "It's a consultation form from a divorce attorney. I met with him yesterday." The words hit me like ice water. "Ethan, no. You can't be serious." "I'm very serious. I've spent weeks trying to figure out if this marriage is salvageable, and I've reached my conclusion." "What about Theo? What about our family?" "You should have thought about that before you decided Julian's attention was more important than your marriage vows." I felt panic rising in my chest. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Ethan was supposed to be hurt, angry, but ultimately forgiving. We were supposed to work through this together, come out stronger on the other side. "Ethan, please. I know I handled things badly, but we can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." "It's too late for that." Ethan closed the folder and stood up. "I'll be filing papers next week. You should probably get your own attorney." He walked past me toward the door, then stopped. "Oh, and Lysandra, you might want to start thinking about where you're going to live, because this house is going on the market." I sat alone in his study, surrounded by the evidence of his methodical planning, and realized that my husband wasn't just leaving me. He was systematically dismantling the life we'd built together, piece by careful piece. And I had no one to blame but myself. Chapter 5. The Preparation. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was getting Theo ready for school. Official-looking, thick paper, my name typed on a label with mechanical precision. I knew what it was before I opened it, but seeing the words, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage," in stark black type, still felt like a physical blow. Ethan had been thorough. The document outlined his requests for custody arrangements, asset division, and support obligations, with the same methodical attention to detail he brought to his engineering projects. Everything was reasonable, legally sound, and devastating. He wanted joint custody of Theo, with primary residence alternating weekly. He wanted to sell the house and split the proceeds. He wanted to divide our savings and retirement accounts down the middle. He wasn't asking for alimony, and he wasn't trying to leave me destitute. But he was asking for the complete and permanent dissolution of our 8-year marriage. "Mummy, you're crying," Theo said, looking up from his cereal bowl with concern. I wiped my eyes quickly. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just something in my eye." "Is that from Daddy?" The question caught me off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "It looks like the papers Daddy has in his study. The important ones he doesn't let me touch." My 6-year-old son was more observant than I'd given him credit for. "Yes, it's from Daddy. It's grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." But Theo was already worrying. I could see it in the way he picked at his breakfast, in the questions he'd been asking about why Mommy and Daddy didn't laugh together anymore, in the careful way he divided his attention between us like he was afraid of choosing sides. After dropping Theo at school, I drove to the law office of Patricia Mills, the attorney Helen had recommended when I'd finally swallowed my pride and asked for help. Mills was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in family law and had a reputation for protecting her clients' interests. "Mrs. Varell," she said, reviewing the petition Ethan had filed, "your husband's attorney has prepared a very comprehensive document. Everything here looks standard for an uncontested divorce." "Uncontested?" I looked up from the tissues I'd been shredding. "I haven't agreed to anything." "True, but nothing he's requesting is unreasonable or unusual. Joint custody, equal asset division, no spousal support. Most judges would consider this fair." "What if I don't want a divorce?" Mills set down the papers and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Varell, your husband doesn't need your permission to divorce you. He needs your cooperation to make it easy, but if you contest these terms, we'll end up in court. And based on what you've told me about the circumstances leading to this filing, I'm not sure that's a fight you want to have." She was right, and we both knew it. The text messages, the public scene at the restaurant, the months of emotional infidelity with Ethan's best friend, none of it would look good in front of a judge. Especially not with Ethan's careful documentation of everything. How long do I have to respond? 30 days from service, which was yesterday. But Mrs. Varell, I'd recommend we try to negotiate rather than fight. Your husband seems reasonable, and his attorney has a reputation for fairness. If we approach this cooperatively, we can probably reach an agreement that works for everyone. I left the law office feeling like I was in free fall. Everything I'd built over the past 8 years, my marriage, my home, my identity as Ethan's wife and Theo's mother, was being systematically dismantled by legal documents and filing deadlines. That evening, I tried one more time to reach Ethan directly. I found him in the kitchen, making Theo's lunch for the next day with the same careful attention he brought to everything else. "Ethan, I got the papers." He didn't look up from the sandwich he was assembling. "I figured you would. Is this really what you want? To throw away 8 years of marriage over a mistake?" "A mistake?" He set down the knife and finally looked at me. "Lysandra, you had an emotional affair with my best friend for months. You lied to me, to our friends, to our family. You humiliated me in public and then tried to make yourself the victim. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern of choices. I know I handled things badly. You handled things exactly the way you wanted to handle them. You wanted attention, so you took it from Julian. You wanted to control the narrative when you got caught, so you threw him under the bus, and now you want to minimize the consequences by calling it all a mistake." I felt tears starting again. "What about Theo? What about our family?" "Theo will be fine. Kids are resilient, and he'll have 2 parents who love him. As for our family," Ethan resumed making the sandwich, "you made your choice about our family when you decided Julian's validation was more important than your marriage vows. That's not fair. You were distant, wrapped up in work. I felt invisible. So you've said. Multiple times. But you know what, Lysandra? I was working 60 hours a week to pay for this house, for Theo's school, for the life you wanted. I came home every night. I never looked at another woman. I never questioned your commitment to our marriage, even when you were texting my best friend at all hours. Ethan wrapped the sandwich and put it in Theo's lunchbox. I was distant because I trusted you. I thought I could focus on providing for our family because I had a wife who was committed to making it work. Turns out I was wrong. Ethan, please. We can go to counseling. Work through this. I don't want to work through this. I want out. His voice was calm, final. I want a divorce, Lysandra. I want to split custody of our son and sell this house and start over somewhere you can't hurt me anymore. He picked up Theo's lunchbox and headed toward the stairs. My attorney will be in touch with yours about the details. Please try to make this as easy as possible for Theo's sake. I stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of our family life. Theo's artwork on the refrigerator, our wedding photo on the counter, the coffee maker Ethan had bought me for my birthday last year. Everything looked the same, but it all felt hollow now, like props from a play that had already ended. For the first time since this whole mess started, I began to understand that Ethan wasn't bluffing. He wasn't trying to scare me into changing or punish me for my mistakes. He was done. Completely, permanently, irrevocably done. And there was nothing I could do to change his mind. Chapter 6. The Lawful Endgame. The final papers arrived on a Friday morning in December, delivered by a courier who asked me to sign for them with the same casual efficiency he might use for a pizza delivery. But these weren't dinner plans. They were the legal dissolution of my marriage, my family, my life as I'd known it. Ethan had been true to his word. Everything was fair, reasonable, and devastating. Joint custody of Theo, with alternating weeks and shared holidays. The house would be sold, proceeds split equally. Our savings, retirement accounts, and even the good china would be divided with mathematical precision. He wasn't trying to destroy me financially, just legally, permanently separate his life from mine. I sat at the kitchen table, reading through the pages of legal language that reduced 8 years of marriage to a series of asset divisions and custody schedules. Theo was at school, Ethan was at work, and the house felt enormous and empty around me. The past few months had been a masterclass in methodical revenge. Ethan hadn't yelled, hadn't fought, hadn't done anything dramatic or legally questionable. He'd simply documented everything, filed the appropriate papers, and proceeded with the calm efficiency he brought to everything else in his life. Meanwhile, my world had collapsed piece by piece. Julian had transferred to the Portland office, leaving Leah to file her own divorce papers. Leah and I no longer spoke at all. She'd requested a transfer to a different department and treated me like a stranger when our paths crossed. Faye had found reasons to avoid me, and our other friends had gradually stopped calling. Even Ruth had turned cold. When she came to pick up Theo for their weekly grandmother-grandson time, she was polite but distant, treating me like a necessary inconvenience rather than her daughter-in-law. "How are you holding up, dear?" she'd asked last week, but her tone suggested she didn't really want an answer. "I'm managing," I'd replied, which was only technically true. "Good. Well, Theo and I will be back by 6. He wants to show his father the project we're working on." His father, not Ethan or his dad. The distinction felt deliberate, another small reminder that I was no longer part of the family circle. Sitting with the final decree, I saw Ethan had won with patience, evidence, and precision. My attorney texted about next steps, and I couldn't even care. Theo burst in with his after-school joy, talking penguins and begging for black and white cookies. I hid the papers and baked with him, pretending we were still normal. When Ethan came home, he was warm with Theo and invisible with me. After bedtime, I told him I'd signed. "Good," he said. I apologized anyway. He met my eyes once. Apologies don't undo choices. Then he kept packing, labeling boxes like our marriage was inventory.